everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. Hopefully you can all hear me okay. As the title suggests, the purpose of the next 30 or so minutes is to discuss some easy to implement and cost-effective ways in which to raise more money at your next event. We are increasingly aware of the pressures on event managers to keep wowing their guests at the same time as keeping fundraising totals high and event costs low. So we hope that you walk away today with some fresh fundraising ideas. My name is Susie Caneos. I'm a business development manager at Givergy, and today, joining us today, we have Sarah Collins. Sarah is our head of special events. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, everybody. How you going?
First up, as we are live today, please do feel free to tweet in with any thoughts or comments or any suggestions you may have. You can find us at Givergy AU using the hashtag #RaisingMore. At the end of the session, we're going to have a little bit of time for a Q&A session, and you can send us messages in the comments box. It should be on, I think, on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. So if you want to save your questions to the end, that's absolutely fine. And just a reminder, we are recording the session. So if for any reason you drop out or you want to share this with any of your team, then this file can be sent to you afterwards. So on today's agenda, first up, we have how to manage increments of auction items. And for those of you who aren't using them already, we will touch on why perhaps you should consider it. Next, we've got tips to conduct an effective volunteer briefing. Then what makes a great MC, how to encourage bids in the last few minutes of the auction, and how to boost direct donations. Now, I do recognise a couple of names that have joined us on the webinar. Thank you so much for joining us. But for those of you on the call who might not be so familiar with Givergy, who we are and what we do, here's a little bit of background for you. Givergy are a technology fundraising company headquartered in London, with offices here in Australia, one in Hong Kong, we're in the US, and we're also in Canada. In the past 12 months, we've raised in excess of 75 million for our charity clients. We've supported over 1,500 events globally for over 1,200 incredible causes. Now, before we kick off with the first topic, we thought we might open with a quick straw poll just to see how many of you have held a silent auction before at your event. So on your screen now, you should have a choice of yes, no, or for those of you who might be new to your organisation, unsure. So if you go ahead and vote now, I'll just give you a few moments to make your choice. Okay, and let's close that now. Okay. So I can see, let me just lean over, I can see, and you should be able to see on your screen now, that 83% of you are already holding a silent auction at your event, which is fantastic, but there is a few of you who aren't. So I hope that by the end of this webinar, those of you who are already holding an auction will have learned some new fundraising strategies. And for those of you who haven't held one before, I hope that you learn some simple rules that, when followed, will increase your fundraising potential. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Sarah. And Sarah, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thank you again for joining us today. So I've been with Givergy since 2016. And in this time, I've had the pleasure of being a part of over 120 events in a variety of cities, venues, and for a variety of causes. Being on these events has given me the insight into what works and, unfortunately, what hasn't worked, especially within the silent auction spectrum. So on that note, let's talk about increments. Why are they beneficial? And how can they assist in the outcome of your fundraising goal? For a large percentage of you, you've held a silent auction before, so you've dealt with increments at some stage. But for the small percentage that haven't held a silent auction before, here's a few tips. To start off with, increments are the amount your guests will go up by when bidding on an item. They are beneficial for two important reasons. A, to create competition amongst guests, and B, to in turn raise you more money. Increments can be the difference between you raising a few extra $100. Times that by 50 items, and we're talking some real money. So don't lose out on money due to taking the time to not set appropriate increments for your auction items. I've seen it at previous events where increments have been left open. Don't do this, as guests will always go for the lowest amount if left to their own devices. I would suggest, as a rule of thumb, don't set anything below $5, as nothing is more frustrating than being outbid by $2, and the item will likely not reach its value.
So what you're saying, so adding an increment of say $10 to an auction with 60 lot items, you can make an extra $600. And I guess what you're saying, you're right, it is human nature to bid low if that's an option, but it's a huge missed opportunity for a charity and event organizer, and it must make it really, really difficult to then reach your targets. Have you ever come across that kind of situation?
Absolutely. I was on an event recently where all the increments were set to $1. They had over 500 bids, which is amazing momentum throughout a silent auction.
Brilliant.
But failed to reach their full potential as it just never reached its value. People just became fed up at constant bidding, as knowing you've been outbid by $1 at the end of an auction is truly heartbreaking when you really want something, and at the end, charity just misses out. However, bear in mind that setting an increment too high can have the same effect as setting it too low.
So what would that look like?
So if you reach your value of your item, you'll end up reaching your value of your item too early, and you just don't gain the momentum of the competition for that item. And people just become discouraged to bid over what they think that item is worth.
Okay, so the result is less bids.
Exactly.
Less competition. Okay.
Exactly. So I would recommend keep your increments between 10 and 20% of the starting price. Such as the $50 item, try between $5 and $10, sorry. And for a $100 item, try an increment of $10 to $20. Rounded numbers I've seen works best, and it'll also help you to reach your maximum potential. I've also seen at more and more events lately where they've grouped items together of lower value. People have started to get creative, which is great, and group them together and say make them into a hamper or a great all-in-one pack. You will not only increase the overall value of your items, but will in turn raise more money than if you tried to sell them individually. Last but not least, look at how your items are traveling throughout your event. Is something not selling? Could the increments be the reason? Reducing an increment can make a massive difference to increasing competition between guests and encouraging more bids for items that may have been overlooked or not bid on in the first place. So I guess just a quick recap of increments. Increments are vital in creating competition and in turn raising you more money. Aim to keep increments to 5 to 10% of the starting price, and check on your items throughout your event. There's nothing worse than having leftover items that could have been avoided.
I actually really like your idea of grouping lower value items, because almost having too many low value items reduces the competition automatically, doesn't it? It gives someone an easy, okay, I want to spend $20, I'm going to bid on that.
Exactly.
So grouping them is a great idea.
And it increases the overall value of that as well.
Okay. So I think, Sarah, both you and I would probably agree that the charities we are working with do a fantastic job of enlisting volunteers to help at their events.
Definitely.
But can you explain to us why it's so vital to take the time to brief all of your volunteers before your event?
Definitely. Being an event manager for Givergy, my role is to not only brief my team, but also give effective volunteer briefings. So it's fair to say I've had my fair share of these and have seen how vital effective volunteer briefings can be when done right. As you know, volunteers are usually in charge of selling your raffle tickets, your merchandise, or your wine walls. They can be assisting guests at their tables with various questions about what's happening, or running around helping your auctioneer get bids for your live auction. So it's safe to say all of these roles are major revenue streams for your event. They're the ones responsible in helping you make your targets. They're the ones helping to communicate the goal to your guests and encourage bidding on your auctions. So an uneducated volunteer is as useless as an uninspired volunteer, and nobody wants that.
No.
So how do we ensure our volunteers are educated in our cause? And how do we inspire them to help us achieve our goal? Personally, I'd suggest to make them a part of the team. Allow them to feel like they are a part of the bigger picture, not just by what they do on the day, but how overall they have contributed to the purpose and to your cause. A lot of volunteers are first timers, so talk about your cause, be passionate, tell them why they are there and what your target is. Will reaching $100,000 at that event help a village become self-sufficient? Can they be a part of reaching that goal? How will their input make a difference? They are the face of your cause, so help them understand and be passionate too. This will empower them and make them the best possible advocate for your event. Something overlooked that I've seen on events too is identifying your volunteers' strengths. If someone has a sales background, put them in charge of selling raffle tickets. Utilizing people's skills to your advantage will not only boost your overall goal, but help raise more money and make the volunteer feel more empowered in their role, as most people find it easier to excel in something they have experience in, especially in new environments. Another major contender is communication. Communication is key. Having a dedicated volunteer coordinator or manager that will help in distributing key information amongst your volunteers is vital. This can include their roles and responsibilities, what fundraising elements are taking place at the event, even the basics such as where the toilets are and what meal times are at. But it also gives them someone to ask if they're unsure. This can make the difference between someone excelling at their role and someone just staying in the background.
Yeah, it's so true. And just to use a different example, how switched on and engaged a shop assistant is when you go to buy, let's say you're going to buy a new fridge. If you've got a really disinterested serving assistant, then it really puts you off shopping in that shop. So the same applies at a gala event. You know, if people aren't switched on
and engaging,
engaging, it doesn't make you want to put your hand in your pocket.
Definitely.
So we've established a well-versed and engaged volunteer. It's more of a fundraising asset, not just an extra pair of hands, or that's what you need to make them. So if volunteers play a vital role in the success of fundraising, what about the host? Is there something specific you should be looking for in an MC?
Definitely. Well, what does make a good MC? Have you ever been to an event, Susie, and the crowd talks over the MC, or the room seems to take control instead of them?
Yeah.
How would you then convey your key information to your guests if no one's listening? Yeah. I know you have, I know a lot of us have. And let me tell you, once a crowd is lost, it's really hard to get them back. So I find a role of an MC is to connect to your audience and drive that fundraising at your event, ultimately providing that crucial gateway between the audience and the organisers, contributing to the overall success of the funds raised. With this in mind, I would first ask, who would fit your event to make a good MC? Choose someone who fits your cause. They don't need to be a celebrity or an entertainer. Just because they have public speaking skills doesn't mean they can drive your fundraising initiatives on the night. So finding someone with passion for your cause can actually be more influential than a highly recognized personality, because they can create the feeling and strategically get the room in the mood to be giving to your cause. Personally, I believe you need an MC that can captivate a room, but not just captivate, encourage the room to become a team and act together for the one reason that they're there in the first place, which is to raise much needed funds for your cause and achieve something really amazing. As we discussed before in the volunteer team briefing, your audience is much the same. Without the understanding and knowledge as to why they're here and how they can be involved, you really can't expect them to do so. Therefore, having an MC who's able to communicate the why, your targets, and how their participation will assist in getting them there, and what ways they can be involved. Are you holding a live auction or a silent auction? Do they bid on the paper or on their phones or tablets? If they are using a technology platform, hold up the tablet or list the URL multiple times to your audience. Having your MC give out these crucial details in a fun yet strategic manner will be hugely beneficial to your overall event.
Okay. So presumably, if you are using an online platform, there's going to be an abundance of information that you could use on the night.
Absolutely. So we have, when using a technology platform, we actually have the ability to utilize data in real time. And I've found multiple benefits of using these. An example of this is when you can see what tables have made bids or pledges, so they can be acknowledged or recognized. Pop-ups on the leaderboards are also fantastic, as it allows for recognition in a dramatically visual way in real time.
Mm-hmm.
Having the MC acknowledge the, say, 45% of people who have pledged and thank them for being that one step closer to finding a cure for cancer or granting a child's wish is invaluable. It really enables the MC to create a feeling amongst the guests in a positive light, rather than shaming the ones that haven't participated. With making this a focal throughout the event, it will encourage the FOMO effect, which is the fear of missing out, and encourage people to get involved and communicate to reaching the cause together.
Yeah, it's always nice to feel like you're part of a group that's working for some greater good, isn't it?
Exactly.
And I guess you almost feel a little bit embarrassed if you're not part of that group, especially if everybody else on your table is. So in terms of utilising your hopefully fantastic MC, quite often it would seem everything they do on stage is off the cuff, but in the reality it is quite strategic, isn't it? So
definitely.
We can help.
Absolutely. We can help by, I guess, but this is bringing it back to the silent auction. You can use your real-time data to find out what is selling and what may need more prompting throughout the event in your silent auction.
Okay.
By using this data and feeding it to your MC to make crucial announcements throughout the evening, this really could make the difference between selling all your items and reaching your target, or taking the items back to the office. Other ways I've seen real-time data used have been communicating how far they are from reaching their target.
Okay.
And I've also seen an event, this was actually really great, it was really great to see it used in this way. They were using it to have the tables compete against each other for a case of wine for the most pledged. Using the data and feeding it to the MC allowed the competition to magnify and really made for a fun and competitive atmosphere. Plus, they raised loads of money in the process.
Yeah.
A win-win, I would say.
Yeah. So again, by doing that, you're recognising the people who have donated, and you're creating a sense of you're missing out for the people who haven't yet donated.
Exactly.
Okay, so you mentioned that feeding data to the MC is vital throughout the event, but especially at the close. Why is it so important at the close?
The countdown, the close, and the announcement of the end of the auction is where all the competition throughout the night builds up to. In my experience, lots of people wait until after the live auction to make their final bids. If they don't win a live item, they have cash to spend, and you want them to spend it. So how do you capitalize on reaching these people? The last thing you want is for people to not know when the close of the auction is, or to have the band playing at the final moments of your countdown. So ensure your MC has made multiple announcements of the close time of the auction and are available to do a live countdown for the last minute or 30 seconds to get those last minute bids in. I've found making a focal point of your countdown is crucial. So if using a technology platform, I would say 10 minutes minimum is recommended. But if there's a lot of bidding activity, I would usually recommend a 30-minute countdown on screen with pop-ups of 10, 5, and 2 minutes to go. It really creates maximum impact to your audience. I've also seen huge benefits in having pop-ups on your leaderboard screens and dedicated screens for at least the last 10 minutes of your auction. It helps increase bidding activity and competition, which I have seen events raise thousands more in a matter of minutes. Imagine missing out on that.
I mean, I can't count on my fingers or toes the amount of times that someone's come up and said, I just missed out.
Absolutely. So many times I've had people come up to me and say they didn't know the auction was closing. They didn't get to make their final bids as they're on the dance floor. To ensure you raise as much money as possible, make the closing of your auction an event in itself.
Yeah, exactly. Make sure that everybody's listening. They've got no excuse.
No, not at all.
Okay, so is there a way of encouraging people who might have missed out, so they've missed out on the live, they might have been outbid on the silent auctions, is there a way of getting them involved, getting some money out of their pockets too?
Well, actually, your live auction only really caters for about 5% of the audience. And in that, only 1 to 2 winners per item, which does disconnect a lot of your crowd. Your silent auction caters for those who want to take something home, and it really depends on the selection of items that you have for purchase. So every organizer hopes for 100% audience participation at the event during their fundraising streams. So why does asking for direct donations, or otherwise known as pledge drives, rarely get used at events? I haven't seen that many this year or last year. So with that idea in mind, that say 20% of guests are in a category of emotional pledges. These are people that have long-standing ties to the charity, maybe have bought a table for their friends and families to attend, are major sponsors, or are companies in the community. These guests will usually give, which is incredible. We love these. But how about the other 80% of the people that are left in the room? These 80% are known as transactional pledges. These are people who have usually been given a free ticket, maybe from their company, or they're attending with a friend, and have not paid to attend the event. These people are most likely to not fill in a pledge card or be a part of an auction. So how do we get them to participate? You need to ask them. A great MC has the ability to connect to your entire audience. Just think about it. You have a goal, and the whole room is focused on this target and how they can be a part of making this happen. And with 10 minutes dedicated to this, your target can be reached. The bottom line is, you don't want these people going home spending nothing. So even to get them to contribute $5, $10, $25, that's 85% of the room giving $5, $10, $25. It adds up. And that's the cheapest night out in Sydney, or anywhere in Australia for that matter, and that I've ever seen.
I know, that's a really cheap night out.
Exactly.
And that statistic of 80% of people needing to be encouraged to actually give money at your event, that is crazy. Are there any kind of simple ways that you've seen actually at events work really well for engaging those 80%? So presumably they are the people who don't have quite so much money in their pocket, but would still occasionally go out and spend money.
Exactly. Well, definitely through those pledge drives and having them to be acknowledged and recognised. As you can see on the screen at the moment, we have a quote from Winnie the Pooh, one of my favourites. It's hard to be brought down when you have a balloon. And this is something I'm finding a lot of charities are doing to recognise these ways and a way of encouraging donations. So why the use of balloons? Well, they're relatively cheap to purchase, which is keeping your costs down, and they represent a fun, noticeable and bold thank you to your donors, and whilst not cluttering the table or guest view to the stage and remaining a playful and unpretentious.
Okay, so that kind of sounds like something that gives the individuals some recognition, but getting everybody to contribute in some way en masse, have you seen that in action?
Absolutely. So another way of encouraging guests to donate, especially in pledge drives, is by setting a target and relaying this to the audience. By having a totalizer with the amount, which once again using real-time data moves every time a pledge is made, is a great visual yet strategic way of encouraging guests to participate. Backing that up with announcements by your MC creates maximum impact. And then challenging your guests, making it in a team environment, and why not? They're there to help you raise your goal. So what happens if you reach your goal early? Have you seen that before?
It's very rare that someone reaches their target early. It has been done.
It has been done.
Yeah.
So one example of that, obviously we told them to give themselves a pat on the back because it's amazing. But then we decided, you know what? there's more money here. We can do more. Let's try to raise more. So they went to their MC to raise the bar. We ended up changing the totalizer to their next target, and the MC went back on stage and fired up the crowd. He challenged them to make their next target, and within half an hour, they had reached their second target, which is almost double what they initially sought. Absolutely incredible. But I guess it's also giving that feeling of the fear of missing out, and wanting everybody to be doing it as a team to reach that particular goal.
Yeah, so you're making it all inclusive. Everybody's part of a pack working towards your goal, and they all get to share in the glory.
Exactly, which I've seen in another way of encouraging donations is to motivate tables to work as a team. This is also known as group giving. Having your MC driving that team mentality throughout the event and recognizing tables for their generous donations or bidding, having bold statements of acknowledgement such as balloon or champagne, especially for table raffles or generous donations, can really encourage more people to be involved, especially since many tables are there as whole tables in a corporate capacity.
That does work really well for the corporates, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
They love actually having their names read out.
Exactly. And nobody wants to be the only table that's not involved in a whole room.
How do I get recognised? Give some money.
Absolutely. So another way to encourage group giving is to check in a surprise incentive for the table. So who doesn't want a magnum of champagne for the table who donates the most throughout an event? This information can be found once again by utilising your real-time data to really drive that momentum. It creates a team environment and the togetherness in achieving the goal with an added benefit. So really the bottom line is if you don't ask, engage, encourage and challenge your audience, they have no reason to give. So make them feel a part of what you're doing and that you can't do it without them. And I believe you'd be really surprised what your audience is truly capable of.
Yeah, it is so true. I think if you don't, like you say, if you don't ask, you don't get. So don't miss that opportunity. Well, that actually brings us to the end of our conversation today, but I am just going to defer back to my screen and see if we have any questions. If you have thought of any, then as I say, do feel free to type them in. There should be a chat feature that you can see in there. Okay, I'll just give that a second. Okay, I've got a question from Liz. Thank you, Liz. How much time are you likely to have to use real-time data? So that's live at the event when you've kind of got information coming in. How much time have you got to be reactive?
Well, whilst using the Givergy platform, you actually have access to this data the whole time throughout your event.
So all night.
Yeah. All night. So at any stage, should you need updates, should you need, once again, as we're going back to what tables are pledging, who is, who isn't, different things like that, you can go straight up to the tech at the back of the room or AV, and they'll actually be able to tell you straight away how much you're actually up to at that particular time, which is an amazing function.
Okay. So knowing that we could give you the information, say only 25% of your audience have made a pledge, feed that back to your MC, that's a perfect opportunity to
drive up some momentum of getting some more pledges in. Absolutely.
Okay, and so all they need to say is, I'll be back in half an hour to tell you how you're going. We want to see 100% of you participating.
Absolutely.
That kind of thing. Okay. All right. I have one more question here. Thank you, Janet. What time do you recommend? Are there any guidelines for closing the silent auction?
Well, since being on many different auctions and at many different events and seeing what time they finish, I find quite a lot of people will close them during an entertainment act or during the band, or just straight after live auction, which I highly do not recommend. So I would say at least half an hour after a live auction, definitely between 10:30, because you also want to make sure that you can relay who has won and how people can pay and collect their items before you're getting kicked out of the venue. You want to be able to make it so people don't bottleneck up to be able to pay, that it's nice and streamlined. but so that you don't have volunteers there until 2 a.m. in the morning because you've decided to close it too late. Also, closing an auction too late can actually do a reverse effect, and you might only get 1 or 2 extra bids in.
Use the momentum.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
So make sure it's, as I was saying previously, that it's an event in itself.
Yeah.
And that people also have the time between the live auction or entertainment to come back and quickly make those last minute bids.
Okay, so someone's missed out on the live, they might still buy one of your high-end products and you're silent, and then you obviously you've got a bit more time for pledging as well. But I guess the key, the painful part at the end of an event for an event organizer is often the queues.
Exactly.
So if you're not using technology and you don't have an online payment gateway, then having a queue of people is quite a stressful period. So give yourself half an hour before you're kicking everybody out.
Exactly.
So that you feel comfortable. Okay. All right. Well, fantastic. Well, I am going to leave it there. Thank you so much to everybody who's joined us online. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we will be sharing this with you. We can send you an email of the recording afterwards. So please feel free to share that with anybody else. But yes, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks very much, everybody. Bye.